Favorite place to take college game day, and I say every time, Eugene, Oregon.
That's right, Duck fans. Welcome in. This is a live episode of the Once a Duck podcast. My name is Sam Schmidt. Here, as always, your host, the one and only Nick Cody. Nick, how you doing, buddy?
I am doing fantastic, Sam, especially the one thing I didn't consider about going live. We get to actually listen to that intro before we do the show. We should probably start making that a mandatory part of recording because I am pumped up. Not only is it a big game week, but now we are in a big game mood. Now, we've had some technical difficulties bringing you this episode. That's why we're going live. And we might have a special guest hop on, help us out, because we had a little special recording we had earlier this week that we weren't able to bring to you guys, but we'd still love to give you guys a guest. And if anytime you guys want to hop on, join in the comments. These live shows are your opportunity to participate, help guide the show. We'll still do our usual thing, but you can ask us questions. You could tell us your opinions on Duck football or our opponent. We'd love to hear from you. So just a little bit different format today, but we're going to be doing a lot of the same things, covering a lot of the same great Duck topics, covering this last Michigan State game, and then previewing Ohio State and our picks for that game. Sam, I'm going to have to remember what my picks were, though.
Nick, I'm going to have to remember as well. I think I have mine figured out, but as usual, we're going to have to write those down, have those put down somewhere on paper so that we know we're not just skewing a couple of numbers off of what the other one is saying. That seems to be a little bit of a theme we have going here. But as you mentioned, a lot to get to today. Obviously, huge game against Ohio State coming up. Before we get into that, Oregon played Michigan State a week ago today. It was a Friday night ball game. I had the pleasure of being there. I know you were able to watch some of it. Tell me your first impressions of that game. Let us know a little bit about what you saw from the Ducks in their matchup against the Spartans.
Oh, this is one of the few games this season I got to watch from beginning to end, and I got to tell you, I enjoyed almost all of it. A couple red zone drives there. I didn't like how it finished, but you know what? It's not how at the end of the day, the scoreboard looked pretty damn good, and our defense was certainly impressive with the 10 points that Michigan State getting only all there in the fourth quarter, really when we're getting the backups some play time out there. So really impressed with the defense, 31-10 win. And as always, Friday nights in Autzen are rocking. Congrats to you, Ducks fan. Thank you, Sam. Thank you to everybody out there that makes Autzen the fantastic atmosphere it was this Friday, and it's going to be this Saturday. I think that's a huge part of every game in Autzen Stadium. The fans are always they're so invested. They're so in tune with what's happening in the game. And, man, there's just no substitute for that in college football. That's what makes college football so much more enjoyable for me than pro football or anything else because, man, the fans are tuned in. They're not just cheering just to cheer. They know exactly how much they're disrupting and impacting the game, and you could tell it from especially Michigan State's offensive line. Man, Aiden Childs, quarterback transfer with Jonathan Smith over to Michigan State, sure had a rough day. It looked like they were getting a good first drive there, and then ball at the 1-yard line. Derek Harmon comes in, I believe. Basically, the entire wave of defensive linemen hit this guy right at the 1-yard line, made him cough the ball up. We get the ball in the end zone for a touchback, fumble recovery. Man, that was when I started feeling really confident in this game, Sam.
Well, I'll tell you what, Nick, it was an experience from beginning to end being at that ball game. I'll tell you what, having the pleasure to be down there on such a momentous occasion, such a big game for so many reasons was so much fun. I'll tell you what, just even before that game started, you could feel the energy, you could feel the atmosphere. Eugene, Oregon was ready for Big Ten football, and it delivered. It was so much fun to watch. Of course, the first quarter we all know is a little ugly at times. A couple of plays you can guarantee both teams would probably want back. It's not often that each team gets inside the 2-yard line and ends up turning the ball over, but it happened on back-to-back drives as we saw. Oregon, they had to punt that first drive, but after that, we didn't see a punter again until near the end of the game. And that's something I think a lot of Duck fans are always going to be pretty darn excited about. Before we get into kind of some of the more real intense aspects of the game itself, I just kind of want to thank Autzen. Autzen, as you mentioned, it's such an incredible atmosphere. It's such a fun place to watch a ball game, and Friday night was no different whatsoever. I think personally, the thing that excited me most from that game was just being able to see the team run out in that yellow, all the yellow around the field, and see Oregon unroll and unveil its cancer awareness uniform and the entirety of that game just in such a beautiful way. Whether it was the moments where you had people who had overcome the disease on the field, ringing the bell, maybe one of the loudest cheers we heard in the stadium all night, whether it was all the players and who they were playing for in that game. It was really such a special environment. And as you know, I'm such a big fan of that Stomp Out Cancer line, whether it's the jerseys, the hoodies, the hats, all of it. Let's be honest, our friends over at Van Horn Brands absolutely knocked it out of the park. They did such a good job with that line. Oregon looked incredible. They ended up playing pretty incredible throughout most of the day as well, especially on defense. You mentioned the sacks in that game, and they were aplenty. Oregon was getting after it, whether it was Jordan Birch, whether it was Derek Harmon, whether it was Mateo getting in on some of the action. The Ducks looked ferocious on the defensive line. And Lord knows that's something going to have to continue this week and through the season.
Yeah, it's hard to look ferocious and look that good at the same time. One of my favorite parts of the commentary of the actual broadcast, which is rare. I don't listen to much of a Brock Heward called game. I've usually got the Jerry Allen call earphones in, but it's kind of gotten popular. The Angry Highlighters nickname has been birthed. I kind of enjoy that because that was definitely what our defense looked like, swarming to the football, all 11 guys, and man, it was a lot of fun to watch. And as you guys probably heard from our Van Horn episode earlier this season, little spoiler, that was Todd's favorite uniform he couldn't tell us about. But very excited. Want to thank the Van Horn family. They're sending some Stomp Out Cancer stickers, I believe, with the ice cream cone design coming my way from me and my fam, because that's a huge thing for me and especially my mom just survived breast cancer. Those of you that know, a couple years back, and we got one of those breast cancer awareness jerseys from the UCLA game last time. Game day was in town, interestingly enough, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But yeah, just fantastic look. Love the message behind the design, and how Oregon fans really embrace that stuff, man. I'm telling you, the folks ringing the bell. You could hear it, how loud Autzen was in the Go Ducks app. And that was just, man, kudos to all our fans out there. Before we get going with kind of our, plays of the game, players of the game, we do have some people in the chat. And I want to encourage you guys, get on in here. Let us know what you're thinking. We got Exploring with Ben and Sam. And he says, DG has to stop forcing for sure in the red zone. Throw it away or run for it. Just don't give it up like that. And that's a great way to delve into this. I think that's probably the biggest critique takeaway from this game is and props to that first interception. Dylan rolls out to his left, and that linebacker or the DB, whichever it was, just pulls off his guy and makes a great play. Really just plays the space in between the two players and makes a great play on the ball. The same kind of throw that we saw Dylan Gabriel fit in there against UCLA in our review of that game.
Well, and I think right there you mentioned just stop forcing. That was the first thing that everyone was screaming and yelling from the stands in Autzen. It was so obvious a couple of times that those were really just a couple of throwaway opportunities. You could have just lived to play another down on both of those plays. One of them was on third down, so yeah, you're probably going to result in a field goal there. But the other one, you still got more shots at the end zone. You may as well, again, live to play another down. I think that's going to be something that's going to be huge in this upcoming game against Ohio State, especially when you're dealing with a team that's going to be able to take advantage of your mistakes the way they will. Michigan State, they weren't quite able to do so, and I think that's in big part due to the Oregon defense, what they were able to do just to completely stifle Michigan State for 50 minutes of that ball game, it felt like, before they were finally able to tack on a couple of points there at the end.
Yeah, and a huge part of that, Jordan Birch, obviously Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week with that performance. And man, it's not been the first time that we've said that this guy can absolutely wreck a game. He wasn't the only one, though. You saw former Michigan State Spartan Derek Harmon get a couple big hits Childs out there and the running back. I mean, they were wreaking havoc back there. Mateo getting back there. I was just real impressed with us, especially just there were times that schematically their offensive line from Michigan State were so worried about taking care of one guy that you're just going to leave Derek Harmon completely unblocked, so to a point where he almost misstepped and missed the quarterback completely because it was like he was anticipating contact, but no, gets his feet set, gets back there, gets the sack. Man, just a really special group we have up front. And a big part of that is, man, our DBs and linebackers are playing great in coverage. I mean, these quarterbacks don't have anywhere easy to throw when these guys are lockdown mode.
And speaking of those linebackers, I think if we're gonna get into our players of the game, there's gonna be a few of them that come up there. But really, for me, before we even hit that, a play of the game and one that felt so important in this ball game, it was one of the first plays of the game. Watching Bryce Betcher just absolutely meet the running back in the hole, push him back, be able to set the tone defensively that way. Not only did it get the crowd roaring, it got every single person on the bench up and cheering. It got everybody excited. And as I said, it set the tone for what was going to be the rest of that ball game. It was so much fun to be able to see that defense swarming, whether it was Birch, like you mentioned, 2.5 sacks for him. Derek Harmon, a tackle for loss, a sack, as well as a pass deflection. You love seeing the big guys be able to get those paws up at the line of scrimmage. And even a guy who didn't get a sack or a tackle for loss, but was really impressed with how he played around the edge. Tatum Tudioti, 7 tackles. He led the team. Seeing him be able to lead the team in tackles like that was an awesome thing. Big fan of that. And Mateo, who you mentioned earlier, getting in on a half a tackle for loss, getting in on a half a sack. Those are the kind of plays that when you have multiple, as we said, angry highlighters, all being able to get to the football, all being able to make the play together, that's just a more assured way that you know this team is going to be able to handle the Big Ten moving forward. On the offensive end, Nick, a couple things I wanted to ask you. First and foremost, this Oregon offensive line seems to be holding up a lot better these past few games than they did the first couple. Obviously, there were some personnel moves around that line that add to that and create a difference. But I'd love to hear from you, almost from like a cohesion and a technique perspective, what you're seeing that they're doing better as the weeks progress.
Yeah, I think it's just obvious from the point of attack and the way that we've been able to establish the rushing game. I think that's a huge thing. With Jordan James having a breakout game, right there in the first half there. I remember looking at Twitter, and when Kenyon Barner starts talking about somebody breaking his record for single game rushing record down at USC, you start paying attention. And man, had that game been a little bit closer, higher scoring, he definitely had the potential to do it, but wasn't just on his performance, man. This offensive line was getting out there. Our tight ends, our wide receivers, everybody was blocking downfield. Really impressive stuff. And I think it all starts up front with Poncho. I think ever since we've been putting Poncho at center instead of right guard, and then moving over from left guard Harper to right guard. I mean, him and Ajani have just, whatever was going on those first couple weeks, it's been shored up. And I mean, I've heard a lot of different theories. Some people think, oh, maybe it was a left-handed quarterback and some of the schemes that they're trying to run more that way. I don't think it was really that. I think ultimately these guys are just playing more cohesive now. They've got their shoulders squared. They're finding linebackers that blitz late instead of, kind of missing those guys and focusing so much on the down linemen. It's been really good to see. And also, I love a lot of the offensive schemes and formations that we've been talking about. Like, on offense and defense, we can do so much with our personnel, and we're not afraid to. We've even used some defensive players over on our offense. We've run a lot of 11 personnel, 1 back, 1 tight end. But now you see us when we get in the goal line, we got a fullback out there and got a big defensive line at fullback. I love that package. Don't know what we call it, but get the wide receivers out of there, bring in another lineman. Let's just pound it up the middle. And man, I love seeing a big guy. Well, even if he doesn't get the rock, seeing him out there full speed as a lead blocker, love it. Love seeing it. Love seeing that. And God, there's no better way to just establish yourself when you're in the red zone and say, guess what? We're going to punch it in, and there's nothing you can do about it.
And I think that's something Duck fans will want to see a lot more, especially with, at least in the last game, the turnover issues in the red zone. Heck, there was even one in the UCLA game the week before that. I think, honestly, being able to establish that and being able to force it in the end zone from that spot. I mean, heck, there's a reason all those students are chanting, stick it in, stick it in. Huh, there's a big reason why. And it's because that's exactly what you want to see from that position. I love that alignment, as you mentioned, 6 offensive linemen, a tight end, 2 fullbacks, one of which is a defensive lineman, as well as the running back behind. That's just gonna breed success throughout the season, especially if they just become a little crisper, a little sharper, and just practice that play, get even better with it. And of course, if we're going to be mentioning the offensive line and how good Oregon has been running the ball, you've got to give a little bit of credit to the guy who was running the ball. That's going to be Jordan James, 24 carries, 166 yards. I know we were talking about it on the podcast before. We weren't super happy with those yards per game average that we had been kind of seeing from James so far in the season, whether it had been close to like 2.9, 3.1, 3.3, 6.9 yards per carry this past game. That's exactly the type of average you need a guy like Jordan James to be having in a game like the one you had against Michigan State. A touchdown as well. I know he broke that big run, was caught up from behind a little bit. And heck, they pulled him out of this game early. I think he had maybe 2 rushes in the second half. It wasn't a whole bunch. He did most of that damage in the first half. Almost any game where you're able to get 140, 150 yards and a half, that's incredible right there. And Oregon, very wisely, after he took the little hit to the knee, it looked like, pulled him out, said, hey, buddy, sit down, relax, rest. We'll put some ice on it like you're a pitcher's shoulder. It's fine. Just hang out, be calm. We need you for next week. And the rest of the running game, Oregon showed up as well. Gabriel, 3 rushes, 22 yards, and that touchdown. I'd like to ask you, Nick, I really like how Oregon's been running Gabriel in the red zone specifically. Tell me a little bit about what you're seeing them be able to do with him.
Yeah, well, especially on that touchdown run, just going over that play again. Not just is he able to threaten the defense with his ability to throw, but even when he's rolling out to the right, which is not his throwing hand, they're still having to play back and at least accept the threat of the throw. And then on that play specifically, Terrence Ferguson is out there blocking his ass off, man. This is a guy out there that he is closing in on some Ed Dixon records out there. I know it. And this guy, it doesn't matter whether you're dialing up his number or not. He is out there giving 100% effort in everything he does, finishing his block right there at the 1-yard line. You have no idea how difficult that is in open space to be able to maintain leverage without holding, push your guy back, maintain, engage that block when you have no idea where the runner is. And Dylan got it in just because of that block. Love seeing that. Love when, especially, when the play isn't there, Dylan has enough speed to get out and enough elusiveness to get out and get out of bounds. We need to see a lot more of that in the red zone, throwing it away, less turnovers. If we can lean into that more, but it's also good to just get a few hits on your quarterback early in the season because it's going to be a long one. But yeah, overall, love what we were doing in the run game with the quarterback. And as Dan Lanning said, toward the end of that game, they just took the choice out of the defense's hand. Like there's a lot of RPOs and potential quarterback runs, and we just said, you know what? Regardless of what you do, we're just going to give the ball to the back and just jam it down your throat. And that is great to see in the Big Ten.
Well, that's Big Ten football for you right there. I'll tell you what, we had some Michigan State fans in front of us at the game, and they were laughing every single time we were in the red zone because we just kept on yelling, run the ball, play Big Ten football. That's what we're doing now. That's what we're here for. Forget the spread, forget the option, whatever. Run that football. They were laughing. They loved it. That was probably the only thing that they were loving throughout that ball game. But it was a lot of fun to be able to see Oregon establish themselves in that way. That being said, that wasn't the only place where they were being dynamic throughout the game. Gabriel, he did finish the game through the air, 20 of 32, 257 yards, 2 touchdowns, as well as the 2 interceptions that we mentioned. Receiving-wise, Nick, I know last time on the podcast we talked about it. I think I said something along the lines of just based on how the Oregon offense is designed, how it's built, the personnel packages, a guy like Tez Johnson, who's going to be your number 1 receiver, who's often going to be lining up in the slot, he's going to have a lot of opportunities. He's going to have a lot of chances to get the ball. And I said he'll probably have about maybe double the receptions as the next guy on most weeks, just strictly from scheme alone. Quickly taking a look at those passing numbers. Trayshawn Holden on 4 catches, Terrence Ferguson and Evan Stewart each had 2, one for Dickey, Whittington, and James. Tez Johnson had 10. Tez Johnson had 10 receptions of the 21 completions in that game. He had half of the catches that came from Dillon Gabriel balls throughout that ball game. He's a guy who always produces 10 catches, 84 yards, and the touchdown. I say it and I'll say it again. There's very few people who are better at making a grab in the red zone and finding the end zone as Tez Johnson is. First and foremost, Nick, talk a little bit about those distribution numbers, if you will, just kind of what you see and why that's the case, that Tez Johnson's always one of those options. And then 2, is this something that you like to see ahead of a big game, maybe give them something to focus on? Do you expect a little bit more of an even distribution in the next ball game?
Hey, man, you got to give it to the open man, and Tez, he knows how to get open. And I think that's a huge part of why. And again, sometimes that distribution of the football, skews away from the tight ends because he is so good at getting open in the slot. But again, going to all these wide receivers, Oregon just has a plethora of options to distribute the football. And right now, Gabriel's definitely at least found the same guy Bo loved to find, as everybody used to say, Bo's brother out there. Dude has definitely been a huge factor. Defenses have to key in on him, not just for when he has the football in his hands, but the guy plays his ass off. This is another one of those guys that doesn't take a play off, whether he's getting the rock or not. And that's huge. And obviously, if we're going to talk about this receiving corps in this last game, we got to talk about that Trayshawn Holden catch because, man, that was a highlight. In the highlighters, getting the highlight. I'm telling you, that was hilarious. You see, he's on the ground, loses route, pinpoint throw from Dillon Gabriel, bounces off the face mask back into his hands on the ground, signals for the first down with the smile. I loved it, man. That was such a play. Didn't love the hit on the quarterback at the end, but hey, if you're going to extend the play, those things will happen. We were able to shake it off after a little TV timeout there and get Dillon Gabriel back in the game. But that's why you always got to finish the play, whether you're an offensive lineman or you're that receiver that tripped, is laying on the ground and getting the football thrown directly at your face.
Well, credit to Holden for the concentration. It was an extremely impressive play. That actually happened right up the sideline where I usually sit for Oregon football games. Seeing that ball come out, it looked beautiful. You saw Holden was wide open, and the minute he tripped, everybody in the stadium, their heart dropped. Every single one of them, everyone, oh, kind of moment from every single person that was in the stadium there. I got to tell you, I know a lot of people on social media were immediately talking about the hit on Gabriel afterwards. It was such a distracting play. At least where I was, nobody knew the hit had happened until afterwards when we all had to look back and go, oh, wait, somebody's down on the play, because we were so distracted by the incredible athleticism and the incredible amount of concentration from Trayshawn Holden. Both to fall down on your back, have that bounce off the helmet, still make that grab. A really, really, I don't want to say heads up play, but yeah, it kind of was a heads up play. Be able to stay there, stay focused, make the kind of catch that Oregon needed to have in that kind of moment. And again, good to see Gabriel be able to pop up afterwards. It's never the type of a hit you want to see your quarterback taking. Rightfully, Autzen booed when he saw the replay. I don't know what it is about Autzen Stadium. Whenever there's like a 50-50 call or a is it not call, really difficult for that replay to get up on the screen quickly. For whatever reason, though, the moment that there's a big hit on an Oregon player or something that's a clear and obvious call, it goes right up on that big screen, fast as can be. I know, it's mysterious, isn't it? And you get the whole crowd loud and in an uproar about it. They certainly were about that hit. That was just about the only thing that the Oregon fans were in an uproar about, more or less negatively, I should say, throughout most of that ball game. That, the 2 interceptions, beyond that, it was a pretty positive day to be a Duck fan.
Yeah, and as always, could not go without recognizing the most special part of a special day, and that's special teams. And, as you can guess, we have to talk about a previous special teams player of the week, Andrew Boyle, getting a 50-yarder. I know a lot of fans there, either in Autzen Stadium or at home, had to do a little looking up, see when's the last time we kicked beyond a 50-yarder. And that was actually my freshman year redshirting, Matt Evenson, 52, 54 yards. I can't remember it, but it was a very funny stat line for Duck fans because, as we know, Oregon, the field goal kicker, it's like, man, as we said even last week, you can't Well, actually, sorry. We said this in our original recording. Even at Oregon fans, having one good kicker still doesn't make you feel comfortable enough. So we've got Atticus Sappington out here being able to kick your extra points. And then we've got Boyle and the kickoffs and the long field goals. Love having that versatility, especially if you have the potential to run up the score like this offense does, because that means a lot of extra points and it means a lot of kickoffs.
Well, and Boyle, he was our special teams player of the week a couple years back during that Oregon UCLA matchup when he was not only the kicker, but the recoverer of the surprise onside kick. The 50-yard field goal, I got to tell you, what an absolutely exciting moment within Onsen. When they trotted him out there, we all just took him in and went, that's from 50. They're taking this from 50 right now. And he absolutely drained it. Phenomenal kick from Boyle. Everybody was quickly on social media. Is this the longest? What was the record? What is it? Nick, I'll ask you this. I think I asked you in our last recording, so I'm hoping you remember this time. You do know who holds the record for the longest field goal in Oregon football history, correct?
Yes. Former guest of the show, and you don't just kick a 59-yarder, dude. You don't just ask for a 59-yarder. Go check out the episode, you guys.
Exactly. It is, of course, Jared Siegel who knocked in a 59-yarder on the road at UCLA. My goodness, what a record that is. And Boyle, I'm not sure if he would have hit it for 59, but he would have hit it from deep, as you saw him do. It's great to know that Oregon has that type of special team ability on their team at any given moment. Also, and I will say, it does seem as if Oregon, they're not where I want them to be yet, but they are improving in terms of kick coverage. That was something that we talked about a lot early in the season, something that had been very difficult for Oregon to kind of limit. They seem to be doing a lot better of a job now.
Yeah, and especially in the Big Ten, special teams are going to be huge. Look at teams like Iowa that just win games based on those hidden yardage and playing great defense. Oregon's got to be able to, cover, make big special teams plays, and prevent big special teams plays. We've definitely seen some improvements there. And as the season goes on, hopefully we get to see a couple wrinkles, maybe with a game day game this week, might get to see a couple special teams trick plays. That would be pretty fun. But also a big positive that we're not just on the football field. We've got people here in the comments today with us. I'm enjoying that. I just got to read this from Amazon right here. I heard that the corn stalks in Indiana always lean to the east because Ohio sucks so much. I love it, man. A little bit of trash talk going into the week from Amazon. And then South Valley Detailing. Sup, Big Nick? Oh, thanks for the shout out. Don't forget Sam over here, too. He is a huge contributor.
And Nick, they can forget about me as much as I want to. I'm more background than anything around here. They're here for the big guy. And I think that we're all very well aware of that. Nick, before we move on and start talking about the upcoming game, let's just go through. We named several already. Just give me a couple of your real guys of the game, the couple of guys that you walked away from that ball game just really, really grateful they were wearing an Oregon uniform that day.
Yeah, you know where it all starts for me, up front and in the center, and that's Poncho, man. Iapani out there shoring things up. Got a couple notes from the broadcast team there, a couple highlights of him. And, besides having a false start, which as a center is impressive enough. So I've had plenty of false starts, but never when I had the ball in my hands. So to be able to do that, always impressive. So shout out to Iapani and Poncho out there just holding us up and really shoring up that offensive line, making everybody feel real comfortable right there with the communication.
Well, we already mentioned him earlier. We talked quite a bit, but you got to give a nod to Jordan James. Anytime you got somebody going over 150 on less than 25 carries, that's going to be just about as impressive a job as you can do, especially in about one half of action, which is more or less what we saw from him there. Another one on offense, though, that I want to give you, just because he had a big play that I think a lot of Duck fans were waiting to see him play. Even though Evan Stewart only had 2 catches for 20 yards, one of them was that big touchdown, far corner, at least for me in the end zone. I'm pretty sure it's going to be the near corner on the TV broadcast. He also almost had his hands on another one, maybe about 3 inches too far for him to be able to pull it in. Came up a little slow, but seemed like he was good to go. I'm really glad to see a guy like Evan Stewart, somebody so highly touted, be able to get in on the action a little bit. He's somebody that you're really going to need to see perform big in this upcoming week.
Yep. And then on the defensive side, I mean, obviously you got to mention Jordan Birch. You get in there with the sacks, you make the impact plays, and you get yourself Big Ten Defensive Player of the Week. Well, you got to get a mention on the Once a Duck podcast.
Oh, he's definitely getting a mention on the Once a Duck podcast. 4 total tackles, 2 of them by himself, as well as 2.5 sacks, 2.5 tackles for loss. That's a guy who is a huge performer, a guy that you want to have, need to have, hope to have at full strength for this Ohio State ball game upcoming. Another defensive player, a guy we mentioned quickly, but Tatum Tuioti, 7 total tackles, 4 of them were by himself, I should say. He's somebody who showed flashes throughout last season, whether it was a big sack in that Colorado game, a big sack in that USC game. He's somebody who's just continued to improve. When you see 44 coming around the edge for Oregon, he's just another piece of those phenomenal pass rushing groups we see out of the Oregon Ducks.
Yep. Love it. Love it. And we're going to need it going into this week against an Ohio State team that knows all about that pass rush. Definitely producing a lot of defensive linemen and recruiting just as good as anybody else in the country at that position. That's going to be a good matchup to see just how far our offensive line has come along. But before we get to that, anything else you want to talk about as we wrap up this Michigan State game?
Nick, just another thank you to everybody that creates the atmosphere that Oregon football creates. Those players out on the field, those fans up in the stands, those even you know what? I'll give them credit, even though I know you don't want to. Those broadcasters in the booth who bring the game to the people at home. They all help to create such an amazing atmosphere and such an amazing community that is this Oregon fan base. Thank you to all of our friends who regularly check in with us, invite us out to their tailgates, have us around. I know I'm looking forward to seeing each and every one of you tomorrow out at Autzen Stadium. And also one more time, the University of Oregon and Van Horn Brands just for absolutely nailing the Stomp Out Cancer uniforms from head to toe. Every piece of it was phenomenal. I don't know very many, if any, Oregon fans who didn't like the look. Most loved it. If you ask me, probably the strongest look of the season so far for so many reasons. But more importantly, just to have such an amazing cause, such an amazing moment, whether it was those fans out on the field, whether it was the ones that they were able to show up on the screen, whether it was a 20-minute video that was a legitimate tearjerker for me this week that the Oregon team was able to produce. Just some phenomenal work top to bottom. What a momentous day. What a fun atmosphere. And what a perfect celebration of everything that is Oregon football.
Yeah, that Ducks versus them video this week, that was that cut some onions in the room, man. I know you say anybody impacted by cancer, which is virtually everybody. So I don't know how you can watch that and at least not feel something in your bones. And they've been doing a fantastic job. It's been like this season's been like watching a movie every time that they've put it on. It's been better than what we've seen from Hard Knocks out there, better than some of these Netflix football documentaries they're putting out. We are getting a documentary series on this Oregon team, and I love to see it. And well, this is a great time to kind of break it down. I'm wearing the Nightmare Green out here. You've already got the new blackout fly era jerseys going on, and that will be our debut of our brand new blackout uniforms this week against Ohio State. First and foremost, what do you think about the jerseys, Sam?
Well, Nick, there's a very good reason why our logo is black and green. I love those. I think those are great colors to have together, colors that Oregon football probably hasn't used together as many times as they could have over the years. I'm a huge fan of this look. I'll fully admit I love a modern Oregon uniform. I really do. I know there is a large portion of the fan base who forever will appreciate Oregon uniforms that are more classic, more old school. But personally, when I think of a throwback, I think of throwing back to a specific time, a specific era, a specific run of success, which is why I love like the Pick uniforms, for example. Love those kind of throwbacks from last year that harken back to those Rose Bowl teams. But for as much as I do love those, eventually, you can't always be thrown back to looks of teams that were very excited to be 500 or better, Whereas when you look at modern Oregon football, those look like teams that are winning conferences. Those look like teams that are going to be competing in big-time games. And we have another one of those this week. The complete blackout look with those awesome white, silver kind of iridescent cleats. Having the green O on the back of the black helmet is just a fantastic touch that I love so much. Another phenomenal uniform. Again, I'm always going to be a big fan of these more modern looks. I know that we have a chance to maybe talk again with the people over at Van Horn Brands about some other things that might be coming along this season, at least sort of in that vein. But I'm always going to be a big fan of that kind of look. Plus, a blackout Knotson. There are very, very few more exciting, more fun atmospheres you can create.
Yep. And well, I mean, for those of us that aren't usually blacked out in Autzen, regardless of what color the team is wearing. But no, love it. I love the way it incorporates so many different things. It has the unique look that the Jordan uniforms from several years back sort of had, especially with the numbering, with the green outline on the black. Love that. Gotta love the wings incorporated with the steel grating kind of right there on the shoulders. It's not too much, it's just enough, just right there under the shoulder. God, it just a throwback to my days. God, no, we got to stop using throwback. I'm feeling old. It's a remix back to those days, Sam. A remix back to those days. But I enjoy the hell out of these uniforms. Can't wait to see how they look and perform in these on Saturday.
Well, and I think that's going to be the thing that Oregon fans remember more than anything. There have been a few good Oregon uniforms throughout the years that unfortunately aren't remembered very well because of results. And I'm praying that these aren't one of those. But it's going to be a huge matchup upcoming in Autzen Stadium. 4:30 p.m. Pacific time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on NBC. I don't know the last time Oregon played a game on NBC proper. I don't know when. It's been a long time. I don't know if it's ever happened, frankly. But being on one of the premier networks that this country has to offer, being the voice of young Noah Eagle, going to be calling that game for all of those at home. It should be an unbelievable matchup. As we know, College Game Day is going to be there. Pat McAfee's already recording live from Autzen Stadium throughout today. It's going to be a huge, momentous occasion in Eugene. Truly, I don't know if there's ever been a bigger moment in Eugene than this one. There was a lot of discourse this week. Is this the biggest regular season game in Oregon football history? Is this going to be like the biggest one of those moments, the most important one of those moments? Here's what I'll tell you. Is it the biggest? Yes, it is. This is the biggest game in the history of Autzen. I'd say maybe the biggest regular season game Oregon has ever played. This is a 2-versus-3 matchup, a top 3 matchup in Autzen Stadium, one of the loudest venues in college football. And it is going to be full of Ducks and probably a few Buckeye fans as well. The atmosphere is going to be unbelievable. If you want to have a conversation, well, what was the most important Oregon football regular season game of all time? I'm probably going to tell you 2010 at Oregon State, Nick, a game you played in, because that's one win and you're in. That's your one regular season win away from going to a national championship game. It doesn't get bigger than that. It doesn't get better than that. And to be honest, that's something that Oregon will never be able to probably witness again and be a part of again because of the playoff system, because of conference championships. You're never going to have a true regular season win and you're in game like that probably ever again. But what I will say is that this is the most heavy, the most weighted, the most probably prominent game that Oregon's ever played. The eyes of college football are going to be on Eugene in a way that they've never been before.
Yep, and we already had a top 10 attendance in the Michigan State Friday game, and all predictions right now seem to be leaning towards the number 1 attendance record in Autzen. I'm not sure how it's possible, but I'm hearing numbers out there that I'm just like, how are we even going to find 3,000 more people than the previous record that one of my teams held against Arizona State in 2011? I believe it was 60,000 and some change. I want to say 60,000 and maybe like 100 people in attendance, but I don't know where they're going to stuff these people. I guess if everybody's going to buy these standing room only tickets for however crazy they're selling, man, it's possible. But I'm interested to see, because as we've mentioned before, that attendance record was set when they had the 2 extra constructions built up on that north side of Autzen. So we'll see where they fit all these people, but definitely the potential there for this to at least be the highest attended Oregon football game of all time. Now, how much it matters, again, with the playoff system and the way everything is right now, that's up for debate for sure. And we really won't truly know until the end of the season when everything winds down how much this truly means. But in terms of eyeballs, magnitude, I mean, we've had some great game day experiences in Autzen Stadium, but this has the potential to be the best of all time. And the only negative for me, as I told you earlier this week, Sam, is that this is the only way Oregon and Oregon fans could get Nick Saban into Autzen Stadium. God, all those years of saying we want Bama and he just ignored it. But no, we finally get him and now he's in the media. Make it make sense, Sam. Make it make sense.
Well, I'll tell you what, Nick, the one time Nick Saban ever did come to Eugene before that, it was a horror show for him. So I don't necessarily blame him not wanting to come back. When he was the coach of Michigan State, they came to town back in 1998. And my God, Achilles Smith was just destroying that version of the Michigan State Spartans. That's a little PTSD. I don't blame him for not wanting to come back with another team. The fact that he's here with the media, I am excited to be able to have Coach Saban experience some more West Coast football. Can you believe they stuck him in Cal last weekend? I think Berkeley's the last place anyone would ever have expected to see Nick Saban walking around. And he was there last week. You got him up in Eugene this week. Who knows what's happening on the West Coast next week, but keep bringing him to the West Coast. Keep forcing these guys to see what West Coast football is all about. Also, Nick, you mentioned that attendance record. Arizona State, 2011, 60,055 people showed up for that ball game. Quickly, just to give you the rest of that top five, 60,017 were there for a Washington game in 2010, another blackout, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. Arizona, 2 weeks later, 59,990. Oregon State last year is number 4 all-time on that list with 59,987. And the 5th all-time, it was the last time game day was in Oregon. Oregon versus UCLA, 2022, had a 59,962 person attendance. And you're right, this game has every chance to beat all of those records. I do believe that they might still have some standing room onlys available. This is the type of game where, I'm normally I would prefer a seat guy, but if you don't have a ticket to this game yet, it might be worth it to get one of those. Stand up around the edge, have a good $6 beer or several, enjoy the game. It's going to be an unbelievable atmosphere in Autzen.
Yeah, I wish I could be down there, man. But again, I'll be up here in Seattle. But hey, another big but positive for game day this week. We got our wish. We got our guest picker, Caitlin Olsen from Always Sunny. Us a School of Journalism grads all know her, all proud of her, and very happy to see her get the recognition. Saw a couple people out there on the social medias that were maybe surprised, unimpressed, but overall, I know we were rooting for it, happy to see it, and she's got a fantastic show right now called High Potential that everybody is raving about. So I'm going to have to check that out, and I'm certainly going to be watching game day this week, which, normally instant tune in already if they're in Eugene, but just that little extra bonus, especially right now. Got so many Ducks busy right now, whether that in pro football or as we had the WNBA finals last night with Sabrina just losing last minute in overtime after they controlled the entire game. Man, it was a great outside the box pick and somebody that, they've been to many Oregon football games, and just I think a lot of people don't know that their fandom is huge. Not just Caitlin Olsen, but I know Rob McElhenney was at previous Rose Bowl. I believe that was that 2020 Rose Bowl game we were both at. But I'm telling you, dude, these guys are Duck fans. Those of you that are like, oh, why not get somebody with more football information? I know Jeff Schwartz was wondering where his invite was on Twitter. I saw that. But hey, give them a chance. Entertaining people that know football, they always surprise you. So anybody with the comedic stylings of Sweet D, I know is going to give us some surprises there on the game day panel this week.
I think that's what surprised me most, Nick. I had no idea how few people were aware of the longest running live action sitcom in TV right now. That's crazy to me. But credit to her. She's a phenomenal pick for this. She's going to be so much fun. I don't want to take any credit for this, Nick. Of course, this is clearly an ESPN and a university decision. But I will say I did enjoy the university posting the exact same picture I happened to dig up and find to promote that exact idea earlier in the week. Again, not taking any credit, but we did it, guys. It was us. We did it.
Love it. Hey, whether we get the message out there subliminally or directly, it's out there. I enjoy it. But besides college game day, everything we know, all the excitement that's going to be in Eugene, there's a huge matchup on hand. We're going to have to actually start breaking that down. This Buckeyes team not only comes in with all the talent a traditional Ohio State Buckeyes team does, typical year in, year out, top 5 recruiting classes, but this is an offense led by head coach Chip Kelly, now offensive coordinator. Last time we saw him in Autzen Stadium, game day was here. Autzen's loud. We've got the breast cancer awareness uniforms, and absolutely blow out UCLA. But now, entirely different animal with this offensive system that Chip has in place, with the players that he has in place. They're dangerous. They're number 2 in the country for a big reason.
Well, dangerous is putting it lightly, Nick. Frankly, oftentimes when you're talking about an offense, you start with the quarterback. I'm not doing that. I'm starting with the running backs here with Ohio State. I'm still a big believer. The best running back tandem that Chip Kelly's ever had is LaMichael James and Kenyon Barner. But right after that, you've got Henderson and Junkins for Ohio State. 2 players who can absolutely tear it up. Each one is averaging just about 8 yards per carry, which is already impressive as heck throughout the entirety of the season as it is. Junkins, he's got 60 carries on the year for 468 yards as well as 5 touchdowns. Henderson, 42 carries, 337 yards, 4 touchdowns. There's really not a lot of drop-off between these 2 guys. Either one who's in the backfield is going to be an absolute problem for you to have to deal with. And then let's just say for some reason you do a great job. You stop the run. You're absolutely shutting them down there. Guess what? They still have top tier quality receivers who are going to be out on the edge. Whether it's Smith, whether it's Ibuka, both of these guys are incredibly talented. Ibuka, a few more catches. He's got 30 for 433. But Smith, just a freshman, 23 carries, 453 yards. He's averaging 19.7 yards per reception. He's already got 6 touchdowns on the season. This kid is a freshman. He has more touchdowns than they've played games so far this season. Stopping those 2, as well as the 2 backs, are going to be paramount for this Oregon team.
Absolutely. And, thankfully, we do have the bodies up front, which you can't say for a lot of Oregon teams, to stop the run without committing more guys in the box, which is going to be huge in this game. The potential to stop the run without having to force blitzes and get guys out of the potential pass coverage is going to be very, very important when you're facing a team this talented. Just quickly going back to the comments, Exploring with Ben and Sam asked, standing room going for like 260 still, aren't they? I just looked it up to be sure. Yes, general admission, the cheapest seat you can get in Autzen Stadium right now on Ticketmaster, $261.80, and that's with your fees included. Wow.
It's a big-time matchup.
Oh, they should drop those beers another $1 or so, my friend. I can't. For anybody that's going to stand through the entire game, you should be stamped, ticketed, and get $1 off all of your beers.
Hey, I'm right there with you. I think that we need to be doing whatever is possible to fill up that stadium. Hey, I'd be a fan of, honestly, if you still got the standing room onlys, open it up a little bit, Drop those prices on game day. Let them know that you can start filling that place out. Why not shoot for that attendance record? You'll get it. I already know for a fact, as is the case with most Oregon games, there's going to be a lot of people who are out there just tailgating, just having a good time. If you provide them with an affordable ticket, hey, even 100, 150, like less, you've got something there. You've got people who are going to be willing to come in for that ball game. It's going to be an incredible atmosphere at Autzen. Either way, though. Nick, one thing I do want to talk to you about, it's the quarterback for Ohio State. I want to ask you a little bit about Will Howard. So far on the season, he's got 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 1,248 yards passing. He's a guy who has certainly looked very good at times, also had some kind of rougher moments. What's going to be required to kind of keep him off his game, keep him uncomfortable throughout this ballgame?
Yeah, the one thing Coach Kelly is huge in all his quarterbacks is you need to be an efficient decision maker. That means what the defense gives you, you need to recognize right away and distribute the football. Best way you could do that is make it very difficult for what he can see. And how do you do that? get pressure in his face, move him off the spot. This is not a quarterback that does tremendously well under pressure. The statistics will tell you, but it's also he's in a situation with that run game. When does he find himself under pressure? And the offensive line they're able to recruit at Ohio State, maybe not one of their best performing units right now, but they've kept him clean. And when they haven't, then you get the questionable decision making. So get him off his placement, get him moving around, and make sure he has to think that extra second before he releases the football, because he's either going to get hit or potentially give up the ball, throw a turnover. One of those kind of plays where he's just not quite sure if he can deliver the football. That's how you're going to get turnovers, sacks, all those big plays that we're looking for on the defense. Just confuse him as much as you possibly can. And you could do that a variety of ways. I'm excited to see how Lepoy decides to do it, but you could do it with different packages, personnel, with different kind of alignments. I think especially we've seen with our interior defensive linemen, there's just some moments where a late shift or realignment in a different gap has just completely thrown off offensive linemen and left them unblocked completely.
Well, and I think that you're absolutely right there. And I think that keeping him uncomfortable, keeping his feet moving, keeping his body, not able to just really ground itself, be comfortable in this game is going to be huge for Oregon, especially if you're able to get around the edge, if you're able to force him up into the pocket where guys like Harmon and Carbwell are going to be waiting. That'll be huge for this Oregon defense. Turning things around, though, looking at the Ohio State defense, their leading two tacklers, they're both safeties. Style and Ransom, they've combined for 52 total tackles so far this season, 30 for Styles, 22 for Ransom. They're both guys who get involved in the action. It's not necessarily like every single play is breaking into the second level and they have to come solve it. A lot of the times, one or two of those guys will be down in the box to help take care of things. But also, you do have to look at this and say, okay, the leading two tacklers for this team are safeties. After that, you've got defensive linemen before getting down to a linebacker. What are you seeing opportunity-wise when you see that those are the type of guys who are often getting in on those plays?
Well, number one, that shows you they're NFL level studs. It reminds me of Javon Holland. When a safety is able to not just worry about their responsibilities in the passing game, but also is able to get up and fit in the run, and they're all over the field. That's just NFL caliber style defense right there. So it's hugely important to remember, because offensive linemen, you're not often scheming to pick up a safety being added to the box. So an important thing, especially in your zone schemes, is everybody being prepared for whoever potentially comes up to fill the gap. And sometimes with I know we used to call it a push call back in the day. There were certain safeties that just, the Taylor Mays back in my day, I think you can point out from USC. Obviously, you're playing a caliber like a team that has some of those pro potential safeties out there. You always have to be aware for how they're going to fit up in the run game. And you don't just want to expect your running back to one-on-one make those guys miss. You'd like to get essentially some piece of an offensive lineman on him, whether that's a double team working up to a backer or just finding the free man and him safety filling in for a backer and just working off to that. That's always huge, because those guys, when they're that talented, they're that fast, they cannot just fit, and they sometimes not just fit up in the run game, but they also force a lot of turnovers with that kind of momentum.
Turnovers is going to be something that's going to be huge in this ball game. Currently, the interception leader for Ohio State, it's Burke. He's got a pair of them. Another cornerback, I'm going to mess up this name. I apologize. Igbinosun, he has another one. This is a team that can absolutely be able to get after the ball, be able to get after you. Also, it's Ohio State. Ohio State, probably more than any other team in the country, is famous for producing tremendous edge rushers, and they've got a few of them there. Of course, a guy who Oregon fans will probably be familiar with because he was almost a Duck at one point, but the defensive end, Tumialau, he has 3 sacks so far in the season, 2.5 out of Sawyer, 1.5 out of the defensive tackle Hamilton, and a bunch of other guys who are getting in on 1 or 1.5 so far this year as well. Ohio State, they always make life difficult on the opposing quarterback. That's something that Oregon fans, you're going to have to be ready for. It's going to happen at some point. This offensive line is improving. Gabriel is mobile. That being said, at some point or another, you can almost guarantee that that is going to be at least somewhat an issue in this game. I would love to say it's going to be another one where they keep the quarterback completely clean. I just have a hard time seeing that happening with the caliber of player that's going to be lined up against them.
Absolutely. And, you say JTT was almost a duck, but I remember specifically being told by some Husky that he was on their Christmas list and they were getting him. But yeah, it was a long time ago. I forget. But I know that all I want for Christmas is a win this week, and keeping the quarterback clean on our side will be a big way in determining that we could get that win. Overall, I think Dylan Gabriel, everybody's pointed out, he really does feel like the key to this game for both sides. For Ohio State, what can we do to get him to make the same mistakes that we've seen these first couple weeks of the season, turn the ball over, and then also just basically, like in terms of Duck fans, limiting those turnovers, taking what you can get, taking getting the ball away when you just don't have anything and living to play the next down. And ultimately for this Oregon team overall, not leaving points out there. That's the one thing that's really caught us in some of these close games that we've lost, is that points were left on the field, whether that's in the kicking game or, some of our play calling on fourth down, just whatever you want to call it, man. Points being left on the field cannot happen when you're playing a number 2 versus number 3 team game in the country. Just can't happen, guys.
You're absolutely right. Oregon's going to have to really be smart in this ball game, really kind of protect the ball. I think that if you were the Oregon Ducks coming into this ball game, mistake-free football has to be the name of the game. You just can't give Ohio State more opportunities than they're already going to create themselves, because we know how Chip Kelly is. We know how Ryan Day is. We know how this Ohio State team is. They are going to take advantage of opportunities. You saw what they did last week against Iowa. You saw what they did the week before that against Michigan State. Sure, they were a little bit of a slow start in both. They were closer games. But the minute the opponent started making mistakes, Ohio State optimized. They took advantage of that, and it was a problem for the opposing team to deal with. Nick, before we get into the real meat and potatoes of our predictions, why don't you give us just a few keys to the game, some things you think will be very important for this Oregon team to make sure they do in order to end up on the right side of things Saturday night?
Yeah, well, obviously, first and foremost, shout out in the chat. We got Sports Chat 503. Ryan, thank you for coming on, but get back to teaching those kids. Is it your lunch break right now? What's going on? Come on, buddy.
Hey, if it is, let me know. We jump in here for a few minutes. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. Send some of your followers our way. We'll take them. But love seeing you guys here in the chat. Make sure anything you guys want to know, ask us. Since we don't have a guest planned right now, definitely let us know what you want to hear in the chat. But back to the keys to this game. First and foremost, besides protecting the quarterback and protecting the football, just not having procedural penalties. You can understand the occasional holding when you're just working hand placement, or, maybe you take a bad step, but man, anything that's a false start or, too many men on the field, those kind of things, it's too late in the season to be having those. And right now, those things, anything that can take you away from your offensive momentum and gaining positive yardage every single play, man, at least neutral yardage on first and second down. But every time you move backwards, man, that's going to hurt this team. So biggest thing right now, first and foremost, especially same personally as an offensive line guy, no false starts. And even more importantly, on the opposite side, man, if Autzen can be as loud as I expect it to be, I expect some false starts out of Ohio State, because as we had mentioned previously in our recording, Coach Kelly is a great offensive coach, but I can personally attest he can't coach out a false start or two. He tried, but I still had him, guys. I still had him.
Hey, and you know what? Maybe that's something that changes over time. Maybe it's not. Maybe he's found some secret formula. Maybe not. But I completely agree with you. The noise in Autzen, the environment that crowd creates, it's going to be huge in creating those type of opportunities, whether it is penalties, whether it is just making it difficult for Will Howard to be able to communicate. Sure, they've got the electronic communication. They got the green sticker on the back of the helmet at this point. That doesn't mean that you can't make life difficult when he's trying to communicate with the rest of his team. I think it was Cam Ward who earlier in the season said, playing in Florida is not a big deal. I played at Washington. I played at Oregon. Those people aren't just loud when we're playing. They're loud when we're in the huddle. And I got to say, ever since he said that, I think Oregon's been holding true to that commitment. People have been yelling already when the huddle's in formation, when they're just trying to communicate the play. Odson's already deafening, not to mention right before that snap when we know that stadium gets a roaring. Defensively, Nick, I would like to also ask you the same thing. What are some of the things you're going to need to see from this Oregon defense? What are they going to have to do to slow down what we know is a very explosive Ohio State offense?
Well, who knows how much you'll be able to slow down the offense, but you'd like to at least bend but not break. That's always been a defensive philosophy I feel like Oregon has maintained pretty well. Give up certain yards, certain plays. The offense is going to take what it can get. But ultimately, when you get in the red zone, clamp down, shut down, force them to kick field goals instead of getting sixes. And the biggest way to do that is to make sure you have all 11 guys swarming to the football, because with the talent that they have, especially in the backfield, these guys can break tackles. It's going to possibly take 1, 2, 3 guys to get these guys down. And then if you still got 3 guys in there, get that 4th guy in there to aim for the football, force a turnover. These are the kind of things that great defenses turn into great opportunities, because it's not just one guy out there making a play here and there. It's the biggest thing about great defense is the ability for the entire defense, as soon as the football is distributed, for all the players to be taking the pursuit angle to make the play, just in case something crazy happens, because that's how football goes. A tackle gets broken, somebody slips, random things happen. So as long as you have all 11 guys flying to the football, good things will happen for us on defense.
Well, I think you're absolutely right about that. And I think this is going to be a really big opportunity for a few of those guys who are going to be wearing the blackout uniforms for Oregon. A couple of guys I want to mention just heading into this game who I think could have a huge opportunity. I'm just going to be honest. This kind of game right here is why you bring in a Jabbar Muhammad.
Yep.
This type of a game right here is why you bring in a Kobe Savage. Those type of guys, those type of top-end talent who you bring in from other programs, these are the games where you need those guys to produce. These are the games where you need those guys to show up. Honestly, I don't think that either have been bad at all by any means, but I think that there are many Duck fans out there who would have liked to have seen a little more from each of these guys so far this season. This week is that opportunity. This week is the chance for Oregon fans and for those players to be able to really, really unite, really be able to, let's just say, shake hands together and really be able to become accustomed. A guy like Jabbar Muhammad, whether he's on Smith, whether he's on Abuga, those are both going to be very difficult matchups and matches we need to see a guy like him producing. He's been close to a couple of interceptions this season. Would love to see him get his first in this game against Ohio State.
Yeah, and spoilers for those of you, well, not spoilers because you're never going to see it, but our podcast recording earlier, we had special guest Jordan Scott, former defensive tackle. I know he was huge on that Muhammad matchup, talking with a lot of his Florida friends down there that don't seem to be big Oregon fans. They were all talking about how Muhammad was in for a big matchup, and I know Jordan felt pretty confident in that matchup on our side, and it would be awesome to see that first interception. But again, I also couldn't blame this team if they just said, you know what, not even gonna risk throwing it to this guy, because guys got not just tremendous season this season, but this is a guy who has national championship experience from last year with Washington. I mean, he is one of the top corners in the country. I could totally understand, but with that talent that they've got, probably not gonna spend too much time trying to just go to the other side. No, they're going to try and take what's open, and it's going to be Muhammad's job to be out there and shutting it down.
Well, I think something that's going to be huge in this game, and it's a Chip Kelly staple, but it's getting the ball out quickly and getting it to playmakers quickly. That's going to have to be something Oregon's ready for. And I think a guy like a Dante Manning, someone who's shown his willingness to be able to hit, be willing to tackle in the open field, he's going to need to be able to be huge as well. Obviously, Muhammad's probably going to have at least one side of the field, maybe not completely, but mostly neutralized throughout a lot of the action. So that other side is going to be huge, whether it's Manning, whether it's Nico Reed, whoever it is that they have on that opposite side, they're going to have to really produce, be locked in, because they can be assured a lot is going to be thrown their way.
Yep. And I mean, of course, like you said, Coach Kelly is not just good with distributing the football quickly, but in the cases of any turnovers, those are the things that Chip Kelly is great at taking advantage of. He used to really, as I believe we talked with Drew Davis earlier this season in a previous episode, Chip was great at coaching sudden changes, and his teams were prepared for it. So, if he get the ball, if he got the ball offensively off a turnover, it always felt like that next play dialed up was set to go for a touchdown. And if not, we'd very quickly run the next play that was also dialed up to get a touchdown. And pretty often we did. So,
well, Nick, and that's something you've said a number of times, and I think it's very, very true. Chip Kelly, he designs plays to go for touchdowns. That's the goal of a Chip Kelly offense. He wants every single play to have end zone potential. That's something Oregon's defense is really going to have to look out for. Frankly, this could be the type of game really where if Oregon slows it down a little bit, that might go in their favor. This might be the kind of game where really grinding it out helps Oregon, which sounds crazy to say in an Oregon-Ohio State matchup. Can you imagine 10 years ago really sitting there and saying, oh, well, if Oregon's able to hold up in the trend, that's crazy. That's something nobody would have imagined coming from this matchup that long ago. Now, though, that's the type of team Oregon has. They can grind you down, and I think that's going to be one of the best ways that they'll be able to find success in this matchup.
yeah, and dude, I mean, I'm telling you, I got into the one time I got to play Ohio State. It was the that 2010 Rose Bowl game, and I didn't get in an offensive line. No, I was the guy getting teed off on and field goal unit. Which after Jordan Holmes got a little banged up there, they got Jordan Holmes out of there, and I gotta tell you, man, and I was, a little light in the pants at that time, probably like 295. I was getting blown up by those fucking defensive linemen, man. Ohio State just at that time that you could just see us getting off the buses and know that these teams were just recruiting differently. Now, that's not the case. Both these teams get off the bus and these look like football teams. And I'm telling you what, we won't have that problem in the interior, whether it is field goal or up front. I think that we're going to be able to cover these guys up, get solid run game yardage, and protect the quarterback. But we'll have to wait and see. Only way it plays out is on Saturday. But the way this offensive line has started to gel, I feel really confident. And especially, it's not like you're going to overlook this game. Everybody's been talking about it ever since the schedule was released. Everybody's been talking about it since Ohio State was supposed to come to Autzen in 2020 and weren't able to due to COVID, or rather, regardless of COVID, the smoke and the fires, game would have been canceled. So this has been a game in the works for years before a lot of these players were even at Oregon. So right now, it's the ultimate time. There's no time to prove yourself better than the present. And when you have college game day, the whole nation watching you, and one of, if not the most talented team in your conference coming to your stadium.
Well, and that's exactly the matchup that's on hand. Frankly, I don't think there's anybody debating it. This is the game that at least for the next couple months is going to dictate who has control over the Big Ten. Of course, we mentioned it. This is a game that you could see twice. You could see it 3 times this year. As crazy as that is to say, that is completely possible between these two teams, and being able to get off on the right foot, be able to get that win. And let's be honest, whoever wins this game, you're probably going into next week ranked number 1 in the country. Unless Texas decimates Oklahoma in a way that nobody is like, they'll win. I have no doubt Texas will beat Oklahoma. But unless they beat them by 30 something, 28, 31, the winner of this game is going to be the number 1 team in the country. The following AP poll. Of course, none of that matters. The college football playoff poll doesn't come out for a few more weeks, but this will be a huge step in securing one of those top spots, one of what I think will be a really important spot to have as a team with a bye. If you're able to finish the regular season undefeated, if you're able to finish it a Big Ten champion, getting that bye week, not having to play for a few weeks, getting a chance to really rest up, get ready to roll, that'll be so huge moving forward.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things that factor in down the line. Potentially having a home playoff game, also another huge, amazing potential opportunity there. But you're right, the bye would be fantastic, especially as long as this season's going to end up being. Anytime you can, have one less football game, that's going to help you out a lot in terms of winning it all. Overall, man, not just that, but you have. The short turnaround coming after this game. You've got Purdue, we'll see. We'll get to that when we get to that. Every game's going to be important when we get to it. But I think another key that we didn't mention yet is that Coach Lanning has been saying, and this team has been echoing, that how This season is truly every week Oregon versus Oregon. And you know what? If they continue to do that this week, clean up their mistakes, don't make this game bigger than it is, be where your feet are, don't be like us fans out there worrying about, what could happen with the playoffs? What's the potential of the winning or losing? Could you be number one? What's the ranking going to be? At the end of the day, nothing is bigger or greater than the moment of being present. And if our team is really able to get better every week, take that medicine on Mondays and then improve throughout the week, every single week, I'm really excited to see where we're at the end of this season and ultimately at the end of this game after 4 quarters on Saturday.
Well, Nick, if I could just tell you one thing that doesn't at all get better week to week, that's our predictions. Those are usually pretty off as it is. The first few weeks of the season, you went first in picking. I believe that I went first last week. It's up to you. Do you want to kick things off, or do you want to?
I got you. My pick this week is I think there's going to be some weirdness to this game. I said it in our previous recording. I'm going 25-21. And you only get a 25 with something weird happens. So I've predicted not only the score, but I predict that Oregon in this game will force a safety. And it was not only going to be a safety. I believe I predicted it would be a penalty in the Ohio State end zone at the 1 yard line. So bold predictions right there. 25-21, Duckies get the win.
Nick, I've got this one being a little weird. Maybe not that weird, but a little weird as well. You won't be able to tell just from the score itself. But when I tell you how we get there, I think you might be with me. I have this one 28-24 Oregon, and I'll tell you why. I think that Oregon, they're kicking field goals, but I also trust that this is the game where Dan Lanning pulls out one of those 2-point conversions. I think this could be one of those games where they just take that play, make it early in the game. I could see Oregon getting a couple of scores relatively early, jumping on Ohio State, then having to really grit their teeth, hold on late. It's going to be a hard-fought ball game either way. I could see it being a situation where Oregon, they're up maybe 22-10 at some point. Ohio State comes storming back. The Ducks are able to tack on a couple of later field goals in this game, bring it up to that 28-point spot, and then maybe they're able to hold out on defense, survive a last Hail Mary shot from Ohio State. I see the Ducks getting out of here with an exceptionally hard-fought 28-24 victory.
And we want to know from you guys, whether it's in the chat, down in the comments, or if you're following us on all the social medias. I want to hear from you guys. What are you guys predicting the score of this game? No stealing ours. None of that. We want to hear your unique answers. So, and for those of you that don't already know and follow, you can follow us at Once a Duck, at Nick R. Cody, or at Samuel101TS. That's how you can always follow us, keep up with our intense, insane predictions and everything else we have going on outside of the podcast and football, which honestly isn't all that much. So, but yeah, guys, drop your predictions in the chat. So far, we've got one from Exploring with Ben and Sam. We've got 31-28 Ducks. It will be down to the end, though. I mean, that's a pretty down to the end score there.
That's a score I was thinking about for this game. I could totally see it happening. My only fear is that Oregon, that red zone, it might be just a little bit of a struggle like it's been throughout this season. That's why I've got them hitting a couple of field goals. I don't think this team is quite past the point of needing a few field goals throughout the ball game. But that being said, I would love to see 4 touchdowns in this game for the Ducks.
Absolutely, man. But hey, who knows? No, I don't think anybody except the 2 teams that are going into this game really are quite sure how this is going to pan out. And even then, never know what can happen in the game of football. That weird, odd-shaped football bounces a lot of weird ways when it gets on the ground. So got to take care of it. Got to take advantage of it when you have it. And overall, man, this is everything we've been waiting for. We didn't quite get here, I think, the way that both teams, well, Ohio State probably expected to get here quite this way. But this season so far, I don't think Duck fans expected to go quite the way it has. But here we are, 2 undefeated teams. This is the exact matchup everybody had hoped it would be. And, well, everything seems to be exactly what we expected, except the ticket prices. Jeez.
Are we really going to say that wasn't expected? We're really going to say that wasn't expected?
I mean, $260 standing room only, Sam. That's
It's
still
steep.
whew,
That's
man.
about as steep as the Austin stairs right there.
Oh, dude, it makes it. I'm like, I could get a cheap Mexican knee replacement for that much. Jeez. Probably need one if I went to a whole standing room only game.
My goodness, Nick. Before we get out of here, is there anything else that's on your mind? Is there anything else that you need to get off your chest before this Oregon-Ohio State ball game?
Yeah. God, trying to remember. Well, the most important thing in our previous podcast recording for me to remember, not forget, and probably going to be how we close a lot of these shows now. If you see Sam at Autzen Stadium, buy this man a beer. These $6 beers aren't doing it, okay? This man needs a good old bubble stash, all right? Help him out.
Hey, Nick, I don't know if you know, one of the $6 beers is a 7.7%. They're getting you going with those.
Oh, but
They're getting you going.
when in Autzen, man, I need the bubble stash. They've even got it here now. GameWorks on tap, just to give you that Autzen feel right up here in Seattle. Because yeah, gotta have that hot valley.
I'll tell you what, Nick, it's going to be an exciting atmosphere in Autzen. Again, I don't know if we've ever seen a game like this for an Oregon football team in the regular season. We certainly haven't seen one like this in Autzen Stadium. It's going to be a blast. As always, we appreciate everybody who stopped in, watched, listened, checked out this first live stream episode. A lot of fun to try this. We might try doing this a little bit more. Hopefully not because massive files get corrupted and we have to buy new laptops, but sometimes things happen. Without any further ado, of course, you can follow him at Nick R. Cody. Follow me at Samuel101TS. Be sure you're following the Once a Duck podcast on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter /X, Facebook, wherever it is you want to be able to follow us. We appreciate it. Nick, as we get out of here, tell them the words.
Well, you know the words, but before that, just expect more live streams, more participation, because whether or not Sam has some tech issues, we all know he doesn't love editing because nobody really loves editing that much. And so if we can keep it clean like this, expect a couple more live episodes coming your way, and we'll be happy to bring on some guests. Be awesome to bring on Ryan Winter over here, or some of our usual guests that hopefully we can get to pop on here once in a while. Drew Davis, if you're listening. But hey, always excited for everybody. Hope to see some of you guys at the Seattle Watch Party. Those of you in Autzen Stadium, be loud for us. And thank you guys. And as always, once a duck, always a duck. Go Ducks.